welcome to another episode of What Are You Selling with me, David Green. And with me today, I am delighted to be joined with the one and only Michael Evan, who is always so busy. So thank you so much for giving us some of your time and coming on to talk to me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's
awesome.
I'm really looking forward to getting in and just chatting about just everything in general, really, because you obviously have a lot of things going on all the time. You like to keep yourself busy, but you're also amazingly well read as well.
I try to be. I mean, it's been a little harder lately. Generally, if somebody asks me what I'm reading, I'll either say I'm reading my books because I'm doing a 12th or 13th draft on them, or I'm reading whatever I'm editing. But I read your book, which I loved. And I try to read my co-writer's stuff, and I've read a lot of classic literature, I guess, in my day. I wish I could read more. I really do. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to get through everything that I'm just doing in my life right now.
Yeah. Because I mean, have you always been that way? Because I mean, you do. Obviously, you're an author. You co-author with JMD Reid as well. You have your printing press. You have your author. You help out other authors with promotional stuff and all that kind of other things as well. Have you always been that kind of person that's like, I just need to be busy. I just want to be.
No, not at all. Well, I mean, busy. Like for about 13 years, I ran a corporate live event marketing company, specializing in live music and club events, like downtown club scene events in Toronto. So I was busy, but I wasn't this busy. I think things shifted for me when my kids were born, or when my daughter was born, and things started to change. Then when my son was born, and they were both kind of at that toddler and just post toddler age, and they were getting up at 6 a.m. ready to party. And it's not like now, if when a 7 and 9-year-old get up early, you can say, hey, go on your iPad for a little bit and let mommy and daddy sleep for another hour. You can't do that with 2 and 3-year-olds. It just doesn't work. So I was out late. Usually, like on the weekends, I would sometimes be out till past 3 a.m. And then I would come home and my kids would be up at 6. So that would be a challenge. So one of the reasons I got into book marketing, there's a bigger story behind it, was just that I couldn't handle that lifestyle anymore. It was too much. I was, getting older. I wasn't in my 20s anymore. It was harder to do because I wanted to give my kids and my wife energy and the best of me, and it was just hard to do that. So I had to make the switch.
And then books was something that you're interested in anyway, because obviously you did do a lot of stuff for Fantasy Faction as well, which is quite a well-known website in fantasy schools.
We don't talk about them too much. There were some things that happened. They didn't like when I started doing PR for authors.
Right.
I was a big content provider, and they just didn't like and I actually was very transparent about it. And I just said, hey, like, I've got a couple of, at that time, it was just like 2 people that I knew that were friends that I had started working with. And I wanted to be super transparent with them because I was a reviewer, to say, look, I'm not going to review anyone I'm directly working with, that they just decided that they didn't want anyone that was an agent, which is in essence what I was, having anything to do with them, even on a volunteer basis. So actually it was RJ Barker who I had connected with and done a lot of interviews for and stuff like that said, why don't you just do it yourself and go and do your own thing? So I kind of credit RJ for being a little bit of an early on mentor to getting into the book promotion business and the book blogging thing, which is basically where it started. And that's kind of what happened. But to kind of answer your first question, I mean, I've always been busy with some things. I don't think I've been nearly the entrepreneur that I've been since I started 4 years ago in this business. So yeah, that's the long and short of it.
Yeah. And were your own writing? I mean, obviously you're very prolific as well. You were just telling us before we started recording that you're going to finish a book today, which is
Right.
which you're writing so many different things. Was that something that was always part of the plan as well? Was that an early ambition that you had, or was that something that you just, when you got a little bit more time to devote to this kind of world, that you're able to delve into?
Writing, not really. So I mean, I've always been a songwriter. I was in bands my whole life, and producing and songwriting and stuff, and I guess to some extent poetry. um I did take creative writing classes in school, and I did relatively well in them. But I think the main reason I wanted to, get into writing was more because I was working with authors, and I hadn't really established the thought until I thought, you know what, like, there's a credibility factor in being an author myself, and I've always enjoyed writing. So it would be cool to write a book, and that was kind of where it ended. I had absolutely no idea that at the time when I decided to try writing Alehouse Wars, that I would have 12 books completed in just over a year, co-writer or not. And I have to give James credit, because he's a super fast writer, and our process is the reason why I'm able to have so many books under my belt. But no, it really all kind of happened very organically. I didn't expect it to happen. And the stories are just constantly flowing to the point where I actually needed to put an end to this series and say, like, look, we need to stamp this thing down. Otherwise I'll keep bringing in cameo appearances of characters from this series for the rest of my life, and I'll never give it the ending it deserves. So we're actually, I completed the first editing pass and rewriting pass of the final book, which is now called Jamie the Captain. Used to just be called The Captain. Now it's called Jamie the Captain. There's both a stylistic and in-story reason for the change. Yesterday, and now we purposely wrote that book before we wrote the 11th book, Here Comes Steve, which is the one that we're kind of finishing off now. And then I'll get into the second draft of that when I get James's last chapters. Because for that one, I had a bunch of chapters written that were kind of external from the main story. So they were kind of like the abstract chapters that enhanced the story. And then he had written a lot of the main story chapters, and now I've got to put them all together, which I knew would be a challenging task.
Yeah. Well, a couple of questions about this, because I was going to ask you about the co-author process anyway. But obviously that series, it's a 12-book series, and as you said, you've written the 12th book before the 11th book. And I was curious about when you were coming on. I was going, I'm definitely going to ask about this, because I'm very curious about. Was it just so you had that end in there to work towards in the book before it
Yeah. So basically, to explain that answer, it would probably be best to kind of explain the whole process of what this actual series is all about.
Go ahead.
Alehouse Wars was meant to be a standalone. It was always going to be a short novella that was like, yay, Michael Evan actually wrote a book. I've always loved writing funny stuff, and I've been a joke writer, and I've done for comedy sketches and stuff like that. I've always enjoyed writing stuff like that. I knew I could handle the character stuff. I knew I could handle the comedy. What I realized early on I couldn't handle was the choreographed fights, the magic, anything like that. I felt stumped. I actually put Alehouse Wars on hold for almost 2 years, thinking I would never come back to it. And then one of my early chapter alpha readers said, whatever happened to Alehouse Wars? Because I loved it. It was so funny, and I was really anticipating the release of it.
Yeah.
And I told her, and she said, you should really get back into that. So I tried. By that point, I had read James's first Storm Below book and loved the best thing about that book was the fight choreography and the aerial battles. And it was just stunning. Like, it was so cinematic, and I was just so jealous. And I reached out to him and I said, look, can you ghostwrite me through the fight scenes in this book? Because I really just want to get the book out. And I've got more funny character stuff, but I can't figure out for the life of me how to choreograph a battle, especially with seals, because they have flippers. And he said, sure. And I was just going to pay him for it. It was just going to be like a little thing where he got me through the scene, and then I would finish it and I would put it out, and I would give him a little thank you in the credits, but nothing else. Turned out he had a lot of fun with it. And it was he was just weirded out by the whole thing. And at first he was like, what the hell is this? What am I looking at here? But then he started writing it, and he said he had so much fun. And I said, well, why don't I just put your name on the cover? So instead of we can be just co-writers. He said, sure. And we finished it. And one thing led to another. And I said, hey, you know what? We've done satirical fantasy with this one. Why don't we do some satirical sci-fi and do a sequel and bring in, walruses with flying saucers and, an evil sci-fi like, Dr. Dr. Robotnik, kind of mad scientist dude. He said, sounds good. Let's do it. That book was Alehouse Rebellion. It became a little bit bigger. We finished the story there, and we decided we were having fun writing together. And then I came up with a standalone story for a third book, which was completely different, Cider of Legend, which was based on my wife and me trying to find my wife's favorite cider at the beginning of COVID and not being able to find it anywhere. So the characters in that are sidewinder snakes in the desert, and there's a COVID-like plague going on that's killing off all the wildlife in the desert, and we need to find the main characters are a husband and wife snake that have almost the same names as my wife and I, Mikai and Lethal, and we have to go around and try to find the cider of legend that will be the cure to the plague. A lot of people liked that book, and then I had some people say, you know what would be really cool? A couple of people in the same week said it would be so cool if you could put together the characters from Alehouse Wars and Cider of Legend. And that was when we knew we were onto something. We did a crossover book, Cider for Harborland, which is one of my favorite books in that series, probably my favorite or second favorite.
Right.
And we went and I wanted to use some of my stylistic influences, like James Joyce, who is probably my favorite writer, Chuck Palahniuk, who's another one of my favorite writers, kind of modernist, abstract, weird stylistic stuff, David Foster Wallace. I wanted to bring a lot of that stylistically into the writing, but also keep the satire.
Yeah.
And that one thing led to another, and then we had a 6-book series. And it was usually alpha readers saying, you should do a book with these characters. Like, but how am I going to tie that in? So I would find a way to tie them in. Now, Max and the Captain, which is the second trilogy, was meant to have absolutely nothing to do with Cider of Legend, with the Cider and Ale Chronicles. But somehow we ended up throwing some cameos in and having it set in the same world. And Max and the Captain was a set trilogy. We knew it was going to be a trilogy about a early 20-something dude living in Toronto with a 450-pound talking panda. It plays on Gamelit. It plays on epic fantasy, urban fantasy, a little bit of sci-fi. And then after that, we thought we were done with that. It ended on Max and the Captain book 3. We thought we were finished with that. And I had been going through some crazy stuff in my life. My father-in-law being extremely ill, losing my grandfather, just a bunch of things that were making me think about, mortality, and made me think about my life. And it made me think about my very first story, which I wrote at age 14, about a dragon slayer named Dirk. I think he was actually based on the Dragon Slayer video game. The guy had the same name. But it wasn't the same character, but I just used that name.
Mm-hmm.
And basically he fights a dragon and gets the girl in 8 days. In 8 pages.
Right.
And when I was writing all these really abstract personal memoirs, I thought about that character. And I thought about how cool it would be to bring him back, but give him a story that wasn't only 8 pages long, and give him a whole life, a whole story life.
Yeah.
So we ended up writing that book. I wrote the memoirs, stream of consciousness stuff, and James wrote Dirk's story from my outline. Really weird book. It's definitely not for everybody. There are things in it that people will not understand, and I just said whatever, I don't really care. But I hope people read it and get through it.
Yeah.
But what we got out of that was that, and I did include Max and the Captain in that book as well, but just in a dream sequence that Dirk was having. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to expand and grow Dirk's character, and also bring up some of the other characters, and bring give the captain, Jamie the captain, the main character of Max and the Captain, because I don't want to give too much away, but he does get level up at the end of Max and the Captain, and there's a bigger story, a much bigger story that could be told about him.
Right.
So so that led me to knowing how I wanted the series to end. It was at that point where I said, okay, we got to do this thing for the captain. And I know exactly how I want it to end. And I know exactly the kind of pathos that I want this guy to go through to get to the end of his story. But it's really intense. And it's way more intense than these satirical books would have been. There's always been heart in the books. There's always been emotion. I've always said, look, if you laugh as much, if you cry as much as you laugh, then I've done my job. Yeah. But this book takes it to a different level. Yeah. So I knew that how I wanted it to end, and we outlined that last book. But then I thought, in the middle of the pathos of my life, that was basically what A Portrait of Dirk was, the first book, and then the pathos of the captain's life in the last book, we needed to give people some fun, some just pure silly fun. And that's where Here Comes Steve came in. So Here Comes Steve does feature the captain, it does feature Dirk, but it's really about this guy named Steve, who at the very beginning, he chokes on a Twizzler, like a normal dude just finishing a Zoom meeting for work with his annoying boss, kind of like an Office Space kind of thing. He chokes on a Twizzler and he goes into this out-of-body experience where he ends up on Planet Steve, which is a crazy Alice in Wonderland type world where everything is pink and light blue. And he meets a bunch of wacky characters that don't make any sense. The story was conceptualized actually by myself and my 7-year-old son. Yeah. So basically all the bad guys he came up with, which is why they're all bad guys that sound like they would have been written by a 7-year-old boy. But it's a lot of fun, and it's completely meta, and we poke fun at the whole thing being completely ridiculous. And I knew that in order to get to where I wanted to get with the last book, Here Comes Steve needed to come last. It needed to be written last so that we could figure out how those appearances of those characters tied into the last book. Right. I have no idea if what I just rambled made any sense whatsoever.
It did. You took me through the whole process from start to finish, and then went back to book 11, which is great. I have a full understanding of it now. It's interesting.
Okay.
It's really interesting.
I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm always fascinated with the whole. Long series are hard and tricky to pull off, and it's interesting how you kind of split it into chunks, and you're doing some standalones in it. Because I'm one of these people as well. I was on a panel with Steve McHugh actually in October, and we were talking about when an author has created a world, right, and then that story is done. why some people don't like it when they go back to that world to tell more stories, because it's just because the story, that one story is done, doesn't mean the rest of the world is finished. Like, there's still
Right.
a world that's been built there. So I enjoy that. I enjoy it when people go and say, well, you know, this has been happening in this part of the world, this part of the universe, but
Yeah.
there's all this going on over here, right?
Right.
So I enjoy that. I also always fascinated with the co-author experience as well. So it was interesting to see how that kind of develops, because I presume now that you were talking before, now that you're waiting for chapters to come in. So do you kind of just divvy up? Do you focus on?
So we have a really, really strange process that's probably different than most people that co-author. Well, maybe not. I don't know. So what usually happens is I will write an entire chapter by chapter outline.
Right.
So I'm a mad plotter. I'm not really. I mean, I'll pants conversations, and like for example, the other day I wrote a scene where there's two of my characters, and here come Max, who's the panda, and Steve the wyvern, who is one of my Steves. Always riff on movies. So there's like a Rob Schneider reference from Saturday Night Live with Steve making some copies. I don't remember what the movie was called, but they both riff on that, and that was totally pantsed. It was like they see each other for the first time, and that's the first in like 2 books, and the first thing they do is riff on like the genius of Rob Schneider, who some would argue is totally not a genius, but that's kind of the point of the whole joke. And there's a whole Keanu Reeves thing where they talk about how great Keanu Reeves is, and they riff on all these Keanu Reeves. That was totally pantsed.
Right.
But in terms of the main story, it's all plotted out chapter by chapter. I know exactly where I want to go. So I'll send a character analysis and a chapter by chapter plot point sort of breakdown, as well as things that are not necessarily chapter by chapter, but things that I want to see in his chapters at various places. I'll send him that. I'll usually write the first few chapters completely on my own and the last few chapters completely on my own. He will write all the middle stuff based on my chapter by chapter outlines and then send it back to me. And then once I get his chapters back, sometimes I'll keep what he sends me. Sometimes I'll get rid of half of it and write it completely over again in my own way. Yeah. But I have that basis of knowing the basic idea is there, and I just want it to blend more so that it doesn't sound like there's 2 people writing it.
Yeah.
So my job is actually pretty crazy because he's such a fast writer, and he sends me first draft stuff. So there's obviously the multiple rounds of editing. There's also the breaking stuff up and adding full sections that were not originally there. Mm-hmm. And then there's the drafts are all done by me over and over and over again until everything's perfect. I actually got an accolade from an alpha reader that read, actually a beta reader, I guess, that read the Max and the Captain trilogy in its final form. And aside from loving it, they said this is an example of indie publishing that more people should pay attention to. They couldn't find one editing error in all 3 books, and that's a testament to the fact that I wrote like 12 drafts, and I probably went through about 35 proofs of this series that's been ready for over a year before I put it out to anyone.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome.
That's the process. So he actually is a really fast writer. So without him, the bare bones of my story ideas would never be able to. I can write what feels like torrents of writing and put it through a word counter and notice that I've only written 9,000 words. So I'm not nearly as fast as he is. I don't think too many people are as fast as he is.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he is. I mean, you're prolific. It sounds like he is just a machine that just writes.
He's a prolific writer and storyteller. I'm a prolific storyteller and conceptualist. And I know exactly what I want my story to be when I'm writing it. So it's not like and I'll occasionally leave something to James too. I'll be like, okay, well, in this scene, there's like it's because it's sort of game lit. So there's going to be a little side quest, and you need to have like, something crunchy where they have to fight some stupid, weird bad guy to level up and get like new inventory or something like that. He's really good at coming up with random dumb bad guys and that's the whole point, because these are satirical stories. You want people to laugh. So sometimes I'll say, just do one of your dumb bad guys here that they have to fight, like bronies, for example, in Jamie the Captain, or rock and roll samurai Elvis impersonators in Max and the Captain book 2. I didn't come up with any of those. He came up with all of those, and he just makes them work. I think I'm funny. He claims not to consider himself funny, but the stuff he writes, I think, is absolutely hysterical. I've been on the floor laughing at reading some of the stuff he comes up with.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like a great relationship that you've got with him. And like the co-author situation isn't, you see a lot more of it these days, a lot more people being open about it, but obviously it's been something that had been going on for years. Like, I mean, I remember I was a big David Eddings reader when I was younger, and I remember it being kind of an open secret in the early days of the internet that him and his wife were co-writers, and then eventually he admitted it at one point. He was like, yeah, she's, and it turned out that she wrote a lot more of it than he did in some aspects, but it always led to that kind of thing then as well. I remember one of the very first message boards that I used to go onto was like, which parts did David write and which parts did Lee write? And everyone was kind of, but David hadn't done the dialogue or something. Like, there was always this guessing game about it.
yeah.
But it's something that had been going on for years. It's not just, like, people just weren't as open about it as they are now, because it sounds like it's a really fun way to write a book, because writing a book is quite a lonely experience by its nature.
Yeah, no, I enjoy it, and like I keep waiting for James to say, okay, enough of these crazy ideas already, because I literally, I'll come up with an idea like that. I wanted to have something ready to go, because when I ended this story, we call it the story verse because it's meta, and this is something that I'm not going to really give away because it happens too frequently in the books that they're all characters in the story and they know it. So we ended the story verse, and then I came up with an idea that had absolutely nothing to do with this world, where I promised I was not going to put any cameos or anything, and it was just totally different. About an aloe vera plant that's sentient and silent, and just watches and narrates the ups and downs of a young couple struggling with various things in their lives. And I sent him the idea. He's like, yeah, it sounds like your usual crazy. Let's do it. So, and that's pretty much what keeps happening. So, I keep making the ideas more crazy, and he keeps saying, yeah, let's just keep doing it. And the only series that's even out right now is the Cider and Ale Chronicles. My rewrites and my audiobooks for Max and the Captain have been such a huge process, and I've wanted to perfect it so much that it's been like a year of working, putting it all together. I finally got Jamie McFarlane, who's like a mega best-selling science fiction writer, one of the biggest on Amazon for the type of stuff he writes, read Max and the Captain and really liked it, and gave me a title quote, which just absolutely blew my mind. And I'm still pinching myself to believe it actually happened, thinking, I might actually have a shot with this one. So, so it's going to finally come out in March, and then the goal will be to continue with the audiobooks that are being recorded by Zachary Johnson right now. He did James's Storm Below series, and he's phenomenal. I'm going to get him to do the Guardians of the Storyverse trilogy afterwards, and we'll roll out that series in the early summer.
So lots of stuff ahead for you, for writing for the rest of the year, and also as well, just another thing that you have going on, obviously, is the fantasy sci-fi focus group, and you've got big plans for that this year as well. Like you had Steve Erickson on doing a Q&A just before the holidays. You've got Raymond E. Feist in a few weeks as well. So just briefly, just talk about that a little bit. I mean, where did you where was the idea to set up this group? I mean, it's got 5,500 members now as well, so it's very active, and then getting these kind of big names on board that you've been doing at the moment. What's how do you do it, and what plans
Well,
do you have for the rest of the year?
so the big names, a lot of those people are people I've continued relationships with from back when I was blogging uh, for Fantasy Faction, Fantasy Hive, Fantasy Book Review UK.
Yeah.
So I met all those people because I was interviewing them, and I kept the connection. So guys like Ellie Modisett, who I have I just interviewed him for Book and a Pint, one of my podcasts, and it was wonderful. And he's a super gracious, wonderful dude. Raymond Feist is another guy that I've kept in contact with. He's been interviewed by me and my interviewers in various formats over the years. So I've gotten to know a lot of these people. The group again was basically, it started off as my taking some advice of people, as I mentioned, and wanting to build my own community. At the time, it was way easier to build it because you weren't limited to how many people you could invite to groups. It was more of I'll invite thousands of people, and if they want to join, they can, and if they don't, then they don't have to. It's not spamming to invite somebody, in my opinion, because they have a choice whether they want to be on or not. And I found when that was happening, 80% of the people I was inviting were joining anyway.
Yeah.
Now you're very limited. I think I can only invite 50 people a day.
Yeah.
So the growth that's happening now is attributed to doing big events like this, bringing somebody like Steven Erickson on to do a Q&A and having 400 or 500 new people have no choice but to join the group.
Yeah.
To have that conversation and then just stay, because they're like, well, I wonder what else is going to happen.
Yeah,
it's not a big deal to be a member of a group that has somebody like Steven Erickson do Q&As. So I was supposed to have David Farland next week. Unfortunately, that's very sad. We lost him, and I just literally talked to him last week. So I'm just continuing. Now, my biggest criticism is that it's all white dudes with beards that are joining to do these Q&As, right? And I mean, well, me too, right? I actually shaved for this interview, believe it or not. This is the first time I've done Zoom. Basically, we've gone back into lockdown for the last few months, so I usually just do the lockdown beard thing. But it's just been such a big part of my life for the last few years. Managed to dodge it though for 2 years, the entire family.
A lot of our family have got it, but it seems to be not in the actual house, not too bad. But it's a crazy couple of years. But same. The COVID beard has stayed. I think it's going to stay forever.
Right. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what I was.
Just that you're saying that a few people are saying that it's a lot of white guys.
Oh yeah, a lot of white dudes with beards. Yeah. So my answer to that is honestly, those are the people that are getting back to me.
Yeah.
Like I've reached out to a lot of other people, and there's a lot more red tape. Like I would absolutely love to have Mercedes Lackey, and I'd love to have Robin Hobb. I've interviewed Robin Hobb.
Yeah.
But it was set up through 3 layers of red tape.
Right.
Through a publicist to finally get the interview. Yeah. Whereas some of these people are just really communicative, and they'll get back to me right away, and they'll be like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Actually, RJ Barker, I don't think that he's doing one. He doesn't have a beard.
No, he doesn't. He has long hair though. So
he has long hair. That's a little bit different. So that's about as diverse as we've gotten so far. But I'm working on it. I also wanted, and somebody said, why no people of color? Well, again, either my favorite authors that I would have gone to, Tade Thompson, for example, is like one of my favorite authors, and he's no longer using social media. So it's just a matter of being able to get a hold of them. But my intention is to continue to do this every week, indefinitely.
Cool.
So I did recently hear back from Fonda Lee, who's going to be doing one. which I'm very excited about because she's amazing.
Yeah. I was at a table across from her recently. I was like, should I go up and just get her to sign my own book? It's
Yeah,
just to do it, and I bottled doing it. I didn't do it. But the other thing that you are doing as well with these kind of established name interviews is that you're going to be pairing them as an open act and a closing act with up and coming
yeah.
writers. So how important is that for you? Because I mean, obviously you have your own writing career, you have your own goals with that, but a lot of your time and energy that I can see is you put it into other people. You're so helpful for new writers, and not even just new writers, right? People that have been kind of toiling away at it for a while and not really getting
Right.
where they should be getting for the quality of the work. So, I mean, how important is it for you to that you're like kind of giving people a platform and elevating them so people actually read their stuff?
Well, I mean, it's what I do for a living, and I enjoy my work. I love working with authors. I love creative people. There is mad talent out there, mad untapped talent that really deserves to be seen and deserves to be heard. Again, it started off fully. I was like doing this like volunteer blogging for author friends of mine that I just thought needed the stepping stone. And it was actually one of my somebody that I was who became my co-host on Book and Appliance, who was one of the people that said, you could really do this as a thing, and that was about 4.5 years ago. So I do enjoy it. I definitely think it's important to draw attention to indie authors that may not have found or decided to even go the route of querying agents and waiting and going for the traditional publishing route, but are writing at a level sometimes way higher than a lot of these authors. And it's important it was important to me to get those people's message out there, to have people realizing that indie isn't necessarily at all an indicator of poor quality, which I think a lot of the traditionalist, I don't want to say snobs, but the people that are kind of closed-minded when it comes to that don't realize.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something I enjoy. It definitely brings me joy to see an author that deserves to succeed start to get people talking about them, sharing them, starting to see their book in lists of influencer lists of books they should read. That always warms my heart and makes my day. So
for the rest of the year, obviously you've got your own books, you've got all your other things. So what is your when we get around to January 2023, what do you hope to have kind of achieved for the rest of this year?
Well, I am expanding my my company to do some work with other genres. So I'm building a platform for other genres, which is something that is a major goal for quite soon. Actually, haven't really talked about it. We'll be venturing out into other genres. I'm not going to be. My main love is always going to be fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah.
So the platforms that I'll offer for fantasy and sci-fi are going to be much larger platforms than for other genres, but there are services that I've worked towards that will help other genres as well. So that's a big one. Probably if I'm talking about my own work, well, I want to continue with growing my community and growing my group and continuing the engagement events and building on it. The last engagement event I did in December on my group was like, for the giveaway event I did, by the end we were giving away like 30 books in a minute and a half.
Yeah.
So I want to continue growing and bringing new people, and I love engaging with the community. I know a lot of these people actually that participate in my engagement events have said that it's not even about the free books that we give away. It's just about the fun.
Yeah.
It's just about the way I run it, and the way I run it with a sense of humor. And it's all about running it like a giant game show.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, there was a computer game called You Don't Know Jack. It was like a trivia show with like a really snarky MC.
Yeah, yeah.
I bring a lot of that into the way I do these events, and a lot of people really like it. So growing on that brand of running engagement events that I could run from 10 a.m. until 4 in the morning is a big one. And of course, Max and the Captain, making it do everything I'd like it to do, continuing with the audiobooks, bringing out the next series, Guardians of the Storyverse, which is the most personal series to me and probably the weirdest and most personal thing I'll ever write. That's really important to me, is just, making sure that all that stuff gets out, continuing writing with James, because I don't foresee that I'll start writing on my own. I don't have time for it with everything else I've got going on, but I do want to keep the creativity going.
Yeah.
So, entrepreneurial things and creative things. And I'd love it if COVID ended somehow. And at the very least, I work from home and my wife works from home anyway, but now my kids are home and we have compromised immune systems in my extended family, and I'm not sending them back to school until things settle down a little bit. So, I would like, from a worldly standpoint, for things to ease up a little bit.
Yeah. Full agreement there. So for people that are listening at home on Spotify or Apple Music, or they're watching on YouTube, the next giveaway event on Sci-Fi, Fantasy and Sci-Fi Focus, is the 22nd of January, isn't it?
It's actually the 21st.
21st.
I had booked it for the 22nd just to be quirky with 22 on 22, because we called it the 2022 giveaway, but then I realized that was a Saturday.
Right.
And 80% of my audience would be away from keyboard.
Sure, yeah.
So I decided to do it on the Friday instead.
Yeah.
So there might be some stuff we do that bleeds over into the Saturday, but the big one is going to be 10 a.m. until, as long as people are willing to party with me on the Friday.
That's very first. So people that are still listening, please check it out. All the links will be below in the show notes, depending on where it is that you're listening to this or watching it. The show notes were there. Also, Michael's work on with James Reed on Amazon will all be linked below as well. And please do check all of that out. There is the Cider and Ale Chronicles, the omnibus edition. As big
707, help me look.
Yeah.
It's about 750 pages, very small print. The complete series, all 6 books. Check it out. If you like beer, cider, whiskey, wine, seals, snakes, platypuses. I don't know what I don't know. They're weird anyway, whatever that animal is. If you dig rock and roll, you'll get a lot of it in there. And like I said, modern day fables, so they are funny, they are irreverent, but at the end of the whole thing, there's a lot of heart and a lot of moral and a lot of stuff that might actually move the spirit a little bit too.
Yeah, excellent. Mike, thank you so much for coming on and giving me a little bit of your time and talking with me. And we'll have to do this again sometime and just, delve into it all a little bit more. It's been great talking to you.
Oh, thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. And for everyone watching and listening, thanks for staying with us till the end. Until next time.